The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Game Toppers, Sleepless Nights, Poopy Diapers, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Sorry, not very good. And the colonoscopy capital of the world, Kelowna, British Columbia, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and sometimes miniature games. Today, Alex is out on Duke-ternity leave with Abby and baby Duke Ruby. So Sean gets a little help from Aaron Cassidy from the Boards Alive and Cult Classic Callback podcasts. We review Uwe Rosenberg's Hallertau. Then we take a look back at the Duke's review of Rome and Roll in our Duke's Double Take. And now, the Dukes of Dice. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Aaron.
Oh, look at that, without missing a beat. And this is episode 262, which we're calling Et Tu, Uwe? That name suggestion from Kyle Kelly in our Board Game Geek Guild makes a lot of sense because we're talking about yet another Uwe Rosenberg game, and I'll kind of explain that in a second. Hallertau, and also the whole Roman Et Tu Brute definitely fits in. And then Aaron, explain your additional meta layer to Et Tu Uwe.
So I mean, obviously the word two is not the number two, but in this circumstance, this is the second episode that I've been on, and it's also the second Uwe game that we are reviewing on this podcast. So it is perfect in the whole, like, I don't think that Kyle Kelly that was who put it out there, right?
Yes.
So I don't think they added that depth of it, but I created it. So I feel like I should get almost like a quarter or a half point in suggesting this one, you know, as a naming, because I found more depth in the name than just what Kyle had created.
Well, I think that works. I think that works perfectly. Fortunately, Sean Connery this week did not put in a suggestion. That probably would have been the one that won. But so I'm glad for Kyle's sake.
I would have voted against that one 100%. I know your tricks, man. I do listen to this podcast. I think that's how I nailed that and Aaron intro. I know this show.
Right.
So don't bring your tricksiness into this game, Loki.
Ooh, I'm Loki in this scenario. I like that. Let's circle back to Sean Connery real quick. So let me just say first that we get help naming all of our episodes from our Dukes of Dice Guild number 2008. We've got some runners up at the end of the episode, which we'll be sure to tell you about. But then, yes, so we kind of jumped into the and Aaron, but I think there's a lot of overlap between Dukes of Dice listeners, Boards Alive listeners. You've been on the show. This is your second time on the show, right?
Yes. Hopefully
Okay.
This will not be a most cursed recording session in which you spend 10 hours trying to edit it together.
19 hours.
Whatever. You know what? At this point, I don't care. It was terrible, and I'm so sorry. But, hey, Sean, you got me to buy a new recording setup. You didn't make me, but, like, I was convinced at how bad that went for us together to buy a whole new setup.
But let's be fair, it's probably not your fault. It was probably not my fault. It was Quentin's fault.
Yeah, we're going to blame everything on Quentin. It's totally his fault.
Why would either of us take the blame when there's a non-present third party that is an easy scapegoat?
And also, we can blame Alex because both times he hasn't been here to make sure that things were running smoothly. So we'll just blame both of them because they're not here to defend themselves.
Perfect. Which ties into some of the pre-show banter that we didn't record. That's funny. We'll let you all wonder what that means. And it's not what you think. So yeah, Aaron, tell the people a little bit about you, what you do, and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. So I have two podcasts that I do, and they're both really, really good. And millions of people watch or listen to both of them. I don't even know how podcasts work, obviously. No. I think they watch them. But no, I have a board game podcast called Boards Alive, where it used to be me and Quentin, that guy that we were blaming for things. But he was like, I'm too cool for you, Aaron, so I'm out. And so now I have a guest host on every episode. Sean's been on, Alex has been on. So I'm sure a lots of you have listened to it and passed on it because you don't find me that funny. And I'm sorry, buckle up for the next hour and a half because I'm stuck with you. And then I have another podcast called Cult Classic Callback. It's a nostalgia-based movie and television podcast where growing up, myself and my partner Lindsay didn't really watch a whole lot of really big movies, I guess. Like, we watched some of the big ones like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, but a lot of things we missed out on, like E.T. or Alien. We never watched Star Trek The Next Generation, like lots of stuff that we missed out on. And so we're fixing that by having wonderful guests, say like Sean Ramirez on the show, to force us to watch something, and then we meet up and talk about it and say whether it's still good or not. And so you might say, Aaron, you're boring, and that's fine, but my partner is much funnier, and the guests that we have on are almost spectacularly better than me. So don't be turned off by me and my terrible voice, but come for the goodness of all the people that I've surrounded myself with.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the show a lot.
Yes, we talked about Dune. I was trying to convince you to record with me tomorrow night for a Dune update based on the new movie. That's fine. I understand you have a life and you can't just spend it with me all the time.
Listen. Here's what I said, right? I said, look, I can't really record Friday because I need to edit the podcast on Friday. Normally I edit the podcast on a Saturday, but we've got Extra Life. So by this point, when you're listening to it, I guess you could still technically donate. If you want to donate, I'll put a link and you can donate to Extra Life to support the University of New Mexico Children's Hospital, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm like, I just can't do it. And you're like, look, it'll take us 8 minutes to record. And my response was, you by far underestimate the amount of things I have to say about the new movie and comparisons to the old movie and comparisons to the book. I've got like 3 hours in the hopper ready to go. I'm not even exaggerating.
And
not
that is,
even.
I know that because when we recorded the Dune 1984 episode, that was a long ass episode in the first place. So like, I mean, I know that it was mostly Lindsay. I didn't want to have you on. Lindsay was like, hey, do you think Sean would want to come on? And I was like, I don't know. I'll message him, I guess. He'll probably shoot me down because he's a very, very busy business boy. So, I mean, you bailed out on on playing D&D the other night because you were so busy or some bullcrap. So, whatever.
Wait,
man.
Was that me? Was that I thought
no,
Suze bailed. Suze was
that's
sick.
right. She did bail on us.
How
That's
dare
true.
you.
I was so ready to call you out on it, and that's not fair. It was Suzanne's problem.
Not that it's good radio per se, but I'm looking for the text thread on my phone with me, Ellie, and Mitch. Ellie, my high school buddy, Mitch, my buddy from kindergarten. Like, I don't know if you can see, like, I'm just scrolling and scrolling. It's reloading and scrolling and scrolling. Like, this was all of our post-Dune talk.
Oh, geez.
And it was extensive. So
Anyway. Can I get a brief update? Did you like the new film?
Yes. Okay. So spoiler free, I thought the new film was fantastic. It reminded me of, what was it, 2007 Star Trek?
Oh yeah, the redo. Yeah.
It's a good entry point for a new generation of fans. There were things I didn't like about the 2007 Star Trek, and I can go on about that too. But I think it was good for the franchise, good for the community. I think the new Dune movie was an incredible cinematic experience, amazing visuals, sound design was incredible. I applaud some of the choices they made. A lot of things to like about the movie. I have a billion nitpicks with it, but I think it's solid and I highly recommend it. I hate it, but I think it's really good.
Wait,
no,
what? You hate it?
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. It's very well. See, this is okay. No,
that's fine. We don't need to get into it.
We
don't need to get into it, Sean.
It's quite good. I was very pleased with almost all of the performances.
It's Chalamet, isn't it? It's Chalamet.
No, I like Shyamalama Ding Dong. I think he was great. No, my issue was with Josh Brolin, who I love as an actor. I think he's fantastic. He plays Gurney Halleck, who is the troubadour master of arms. He's a bard.
He's a bard. I was gonna say he's a bard.
Did you get the sense he was a bard from the movie?
No, not at all. He seemed not jovial enough to be a bard in that one.
The Gurney character, which was played by, as I told you, man, which was played by Patrick Stewart in.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot that he was. Oh man, yeah.
And he was a great Gurney Halleck. Even I can't remember the actor's name, but even the 2000 sci-fi miniseries Gurney Halleck was great. Like he both the like super severe, but then like very bardish. And so yeah, I thought Josh Brolin was very one note.
Yeah,
that's one of my bigger complaints. Plus, I don't know if you remember from the David Lynch movie, there's the scene where the Harkonnens are attacking the Atreides on Arrakeen, and Patrick Stewart has the Duke's pug in his arm and yells out, "For the Duke!" and then charges.
That is an amazing scene. Yeah, that is. It's nothing will ever. Nothing in the new Dune movie even meets how good that moment from that film was.
Ducal pugs. That's all I want from life.
Well, if you folks want to hear about my opinion on it, we're going to do a bonus episode this month. Normally we do one episode a month, but we're going to do a special bonus one this month. So you check out Cult Classic Callback. Actually, it's all stored on the boardsalivepodcast.com website. So go over there and find all our stuff, and you'll be able to listen to all that.
Wasn't it great timing how we planned to do it last year and then they moved the movie out a year?
Yeah, it's so good. Oh, that was so awkward. So great. You know, so good.
All right. Well, this is not a podcast about Dune, as much as I might like it to be. I could do that. I could totally do that. But it's a podcast about board games, although we're changing things up a little bit this episode to kind of reflect our fine gentlemanly guest.
That's like the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me, calling me a gentleman. My goodness.
Well, it was a little sarcastic.
Oh.
So we're going to talk about board games and then a digital diversion.
Yeah, that's a segment on my podcast. Why are you copying my style, my dude?
I very rarely have two board games to talk about. Although it's interesting, I could actually talk about two board games. I wasn't planning on being able to talk about two board games. But I'm only going to talk about one because I have a pretty cool digital diversion that is tabletop game adjacent. So
yes. And mine is not really, but that's fine.
That's fine. Well, it's slightly related to Baseball Highlights 2045 first mention.
Dang it. I was hoping to pull. I was hoping to do that later. You son of a gun.
I knew you were. I know.
That's brutal. You are the worst.
Aaron, tell me about a board game that you've played recently.
All right. So I'm going to tell you about a game that I thought, spoiler alert, was pretty fine. But it's also based on a video game. It is Anno 1800, and it's based on that same video game put out by Ubisoft, which is, in my opinion, not a good company. But the board game is put out by Cosmos, and it's designed by Martin Wallace, who some would argue is not necessarily the nicest human either. So who knows, right? We're all over the place. But Anno 1800 is a civilization developing game where you are trying to curry favor with your people, with the people that live in your society. And by that, I mean that the game end trigger is when you fulfill all the needs of all of the citizens in your society. That will, if one player does that, the game will end after like a round or something after that. But what I mean by that is that every worker you have in the game, it gives you a card, and that card has some sort of resource or something requirement that you need to complete to satisfy them, and then you'll get some bonus for it. But that means that over the course of the game, if you get more workers, because this is sort of a worker placement game, you will add more cards into this like hand of cards that you're trying to fulfill. So the more workers you get, the more needs you need to fulfill, which is, I think, thematically interesting, because the more people in your society, the more you need to, provide for them. But it is a game where you have the potential for 5 different colored cubes, each representing a different type of worker. There's like the green cubes are like the farmers, and then the blue cubes are more of the industrial revolution type people, and then the red cubes are fancier people, and on until you get all the way up to blue, or teal, I guess is the last color. But you use those cubes to trigger actions on your own personal player board. So that's why when I say it's not totally a worker placement game, it's because it doesn't have that blocking aspect of a worker placement game where you are taking action, you're drafting actions away from other players. You're just almost doing action selection with your cubes onto your own player board. And you're going to have a whole player board full of resource options that you can send your workers to produce stuff. And the reason you do that is to buy more resource production spots from the main board. The main board is this like almost like a tech tree of options for you to put that resource tile onto your board to later use your own workers to produce it, to trigger more options on the player board to fulfill the cards in your hand that are like the requirements for your people. So a round or a turn is just one action. So on your turn, you either buy one of the tiles from the main board by triggering some of the resources on your own personal board, or there's this whole like boating aspect to it where you can travel places, you can explore and discover new lands, because this is a civilization building game. And so you can discover local new lands or like overseas, like Caribbean new lands. And so the difference is when you discover local areas, you'll get more spots to put those resources from that center board that you're collecting. Or if you go overseas to other places, you'll get exotic resources that are required for developing things like chocolate. And so there's all these different things. And as you progress forward with technology, you're going to buy like, a compass. You're going to create a compass, or you're going to create glass, or you're going to create a gun or sails or whatever. There's all sorts of different technologies from that main board that you're going to collect. And that will help you fulfill things. And you just go round and round and round until everybody, or till one player has finished all the requirements in their hand, and then the game is scored, and whoever has the most points wins, because it's a Euro game. It is sort of interesting. I think the tech tree aspect of it was quite interesting. The other thing that's really cool is, say you miss out on one of those technologies in the middle. That's okay, because you can actually use your boats to trade, to borrow resource from one of the other players in the game. So you just spend some of these like trade tokens that you develop with some of the boats that you create, and that player lends you that resource for the action you're trying to do, and they get like a gold, and gold can be spent to like bring your workers back off your board, or they are worth points at the end of the game, and sometimes they're like requirements for stuff. So it was really interesting, because it's not that involved for how weighty a game it is. Like, it's not that hard to understand, it's not that hard to teach. It could be a little overwhelming for people, because there are like, if you bring up a picture of this game, there's like 40 little resource tokens on the board. So there's tons of stuff, but you're really only looking at one section of it at the start of the game. And over time, you'll slowly start exploring more of it, because that's when you'll have the resources to collect guns or, dynamite or whatever ridiculous higher end technology there is. But for me, in the end, I was kind of like, it was fine. It didn't really excite me. It wasn't a bad game. There was no point in time where I was like, well, I'm bored or I'm not having an enjoyable experience, but I didn't feel super clever throughout the game, which is a thing that I know you value a lot. And I didn't really feel like I was making optimal choices throughout the game. I think I made some mistakes as I played it, but I don't feel like that factored into my overall opinion of it. I don't care to ever play it again. And I think my buddy Brendan, who's the one that owns it, he's played it a couple times, and he's also like, I don't think he's going to keep it either. Like a couple of like the other guy, our buddy Scott, that played it with us, he liked it more than both of us. And so he was like, yeah, I think it's interesting. But just for me, I was very fine on it. I don't know.
So you and I tend to have similar opinions on games. Is there any chance that Alex would like this? My guess is no.
No. I think it would be. I think Alex would appreciate the quickness. Like your turn comes, you do an action, and you move on, right? And so the turns coming around quickly was nice. Maybe I don't know. What's Alex's valuation on like tech tree style games? Like this I think is the best version of a tech tree that I've seen in a board game. Even better than like what was the Sun one with the dice?
Beyond the Sun.
Yeah, Beyond the Sun.
Beyond the Sun.
That's a good question. I'm gonna look it up while you tell me what Alex thinks of these games.
I think he tends to like tech tree games. I remember, what was it? It was an NSKN game, Progress, Evolution of Technology, that was like just a tech tree, like just bare bones tech tree. I think he would like Beyond the Sun, if that's the name of the game.
It is. I checked it.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think he would like tech trees, but yeah, it doesn't sound quite like an Alex game.
No. And I don't think the theme, like, hey, kudos to them for making a Civilization game that doesn't include slavery. That's a bonus. But overall I think there was some interesting thematic stuff. I didn't feel like I was, taking advantage of anyone thematic, and like the idea of Civilization game of like grabbing territory and take the when you explore overseas and get the resources, you actually have to pay to take those resources back. So it's not even, so there's at least an exchange of goods in that circumstance. You don't just automatically get those goods for the rest of the game. You have access to buying those goods. So it's not even like, that kind of was like, oh, okay, interesting. At least you're not just like taking whatever you want from the world around you. And you are trying to fulfill the needs of your people. So that's a thing. I don't know.
Super sweet.
Yeah.
Like you're sweet. You, the player, are sweet.
Yeah.
Your subjects.
Yeah. Your big goal. It's almost like you're running for office and you're just trying to make sure that everyone wants to vote for you in the end, because you're just trying to fulfill everyone's needs. So I would make a joke there, but I know that this is on a specific network that doesn't allow for those very funny, good jokes.
We're not allowed to make jokes at all.
No, not
any
at
way,
all.
shape, or form.
So yeah, Anno 1800 from Cosmos. It's a real meh from me.
All right. Well, this game that I played is way lighter, way quicker. It's called Great Plains. It's from Lookout Games. It has art by Clemens Franz and two designers that I always keep my eye on. That's Trevor Benjamin and Brett J. Gilbert. Trevor Benjamin designed Undaunted, which I feel is a better game than I gave it credit for, and there was a lot I liked about it, but still a lot I didn't. I am interested in trying the Undaunted North Africa. I think there's some things I might like better there. He also is one of the designers of War Chest, which is a nice little abstract that I think is fantastic. The other guy, Brett J. Gilbert, is one of the co-designers of Elysium, which is a Boxcars winner. Ooh, love Elysium. Okay, so Great Plains is one of Lookout Games' two-player games. It's like a 15, 20-minute game. Super simple. One of you is or are the snakes. The other one are the wolves or foxes, these little turquoise and then orange pieces. And you are trying to get area majority in the lowlands. So there are these different hex tiles that you can rotate, you can flip, you can do whatever to kind of set up a random board. And this board that you're creating has three different types of terrain. There are mountains, which are largely impassable. There are the plains, which provide you with certain bonuses. But most importantly, there are the lowlands that, again, you're going to be scoring some sort of area majority. So at the end of the game, for each lowlands where you have the most of your markers out, you're going to score a number of points equal to the size of that lowland. So you count up all the hexes, and then bonus points if there are these little waterfalls or water features that are in those hexes. So the game is going to start with you placing your caves. There are these kind of predetermined places to place caves on the board. Each player has 3 caves, And you start by placing those out on those predetermined places. I go, you go. And then the player that was second to place a cave is now going to start to place their little meeples, their snake or their fox meeples. You can place one of your meeples adjacent to a cave or adjacent to another meeple that you've already placed. So pretty straightforward. You've got 3 options at the start of the game, and then it just kind of branches out from there. Now, very often you'll start by placing in the plains, and in the plains, there are these 3 types of tokens that you're able to get when you place. And there's little symbols on the board, so it determines which one you get. There is the eagle, the weird horse, and the bear. Okay, so you acquire these tokens, and then in subsequent turns, you could spend these tokens to get some sort of special effect with your placement. So if I want to place one of my guys and I spend a horse, it lets me place a token 1 space further than I would be able to otherwise. So my little snake jumps on back of a horse and gets a free ride. All right, cool. There's also the eagle. I could spend that, and that will let me travel 1 space over a mountain, which are otherwise impassable. And then there's the bear, or as I like to call it, the super OP bear, which can let you push an enemy token. And if you push them into a mountain, or if you push them off the board, they're just gone. Okay. I did not realize how OP they were.
The murder bear.
Yeah, murder bear. And at the start of the game, my opponent who was teaching me the game failed to say, hey, prioritize getting bears because they're super strong.
Because that person really wanted to win the game, right?
Yes.
That's what games are about, dominating your opponent.
Absolutely. Did I tell you, I don't know if I ever told this story in the podcast. About a month ago, I played one of Mariah's friend's boyfriends and taught him Warhammer 40,000.
No.
Did I mention? I don't think I mentioned that. So this 20-year-old kid, right? Like I'm 20 years his senior, which is weird. Like I've literally been playing Warhammer longer than he's been alive. And I'm there to teach him and I steamroll him. This is no exaggeration.
No.
This is no exaggeration. At the end of the game, I literally had every single one of my models that I started with, and I wiped him out completely.
That's real bad. You did a bad job there, Sean.
I was literally pulling my punches. I was literally like failing to shoot with things that I was able to shoot with, and failing I'm literally only gonna use half my army this game. Anyway, it was completely unintentional. I have taught Warhammer to so many people, and like Mariah beats me like about half the time. I'm helping her, teaching her and whatnot. Like it was weird. It was super weird. Anyway, Great Plains. This was good. I like this quite a bit. It's quick. It's pretty snappy. Just get the bears or compete for the bears. What's interesting is there's only 3 of each token, and they're finite, except they'll replenish when you use them, right? So if one person just grabs all 3 bears and sits on them all game and then uses them all at the end, hey, what are you going to do? At the end of the game, though, despite me getting bear handled, we tied 10-10, which was super satisfying, except it wasn't. But I thought this was really good. And it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably a little bit too short. I think it would probably wear out its welcome. I think I could probably play this 4 or 5 times. I mean, it is the epitome of a tactical game, right? There's really no variability other than, I can rotate these tiles at setup. But I think it's worthwhile playing. Like I would say War Chess is probably the better game because there is a lot more variability in terms of the different types of tokens that you can have. But I think this is definitely worth checking out, especially if you gravitate towards lighter games and 2-player games, especially. I think it's worthwhile checking out. I think Alex would like this a lot. I didn't buy it. I'm not going to buy it, but I'd certainly, in some sense, the speed of the game, the short gameplay with a pretty satisfying gameplay is a strength because I was literally there to play Hallertau, and our third for Hallertau was going to be back in like 10 minutes. And I'm like, hey, teach me how to play Great Plains. And he taught me and we played it. And the dude only had to wait like 5 minutes for us to finish. So yeah,
that's cool.
I say check it out.
I think Alex should pick it up then.
Oh, absolutely. Let's make him buy all the games.
Totally.
All right, well, that is Great Plains from Lookout Games. Aaron, what you got for me? You got a little video game?
Yeah. Okay. So do you want me to like intro this segment? Do you want me to like explain? So on
Yeah.
my show, because I'll tell you the reasoning. I don't talk about this on my own show, but this is your show, so whatever. On my show, I got tired of having to play, 2 games every 2 weeks, 2 brand new games that I could talk about, because at a certain point after doing a podcast for 7 years, it's quite onerous. And I mean, people on here listening, this because Sean complains about it all the time because he's so bad at getting games played for the podcast that he runs. So that's kind of why I introduced video games. And also I got back into video games pretty heavily in the last like year and a half. And so I wanted to introduce it to my show. And so when Sean was on the show, he got to talk about a video game at the same time. He talked about a game called Roguebook, which I bet lots of folks would be into. It's designed partially by Richard Garfield, but It's a video game that's like a deck builder that's kind of like Smash Up, and you like mix them together. I don't know. I'm not going to go into it. It's really cool. You should go listen to that episode, obviously, because I was on it and Sean was there too, and it was good. So go check that out. But it gives me an opportunity to talk about video games, which is a passion of mine since I was like 5 years old and my uncle bought my family a Nintendo. So I love video games. So the one I wanted to talk about is one that I just can't stop playing. It's MLB The Show 21. And please don't just zone out because, sports is not your thing or whatever, because there's definitely an aspect to this that hits that board game collector need. And that's because this game that I've played for the first time in 5 years has added a new mode over the last couple of years since I stopped playing it, where you build a dynasty team based on collecting cards. So it brings out that like need to, Pokemon style catch 'em all, right? The need that we have as board game collectors to amass a collection that is so big that we can't even keep it on our shelves in our household. And so it's a really cool game in general because there's just tons of depth to this video game. There's tons of different modes you can play. If you want to make a career mode, there's a really cool career mode that for the first time ever has you being a 2-way player, which means that you both pitch and hit and play a position, which was really interesting. That's all because of Shohei Ohtani, who is a phenomenal Japanese baseball player who plays for the LA Angels. But that mode is really interesting. If you want to do the like Euro style managing a team, you can, and then you have to, be in charge of payroll and making trades and hiring free agents, and you don't even have to play the game. You can simulate all the actual games and just manage the team. So if you like that style of video game or Euro style game, you can do that. There's these cool the March to October is a mode where you only play main highlights of games. So very much like Baseball Highlights 2045 second mention, which is a real bummer, you jerk. But you only play certain moments in a team's attempt at making the playoffs. And so your success or failure in that will dictate whether they make the playoffs and then how deep they go in the playoffs. So that's a really interesting mode. But the Diamond Dynasty is the thing that just has its hooks in me. You get and this is, they release cards that you can get through like completing goals. They have monthly goals where you earn experience and you slowly earn different cards and stuff like that. And there's blind packs, so some people hate that. Yes, you can spend your own money doing that, which I've never spent any money on this actually because I got it through Xbox Game Pass, which is a wild thing. It's a Netflix of video games, essentially, is the easiest way to talk about it. But so I've never spent any money on this game, but I have a team that is amazing. I have like Willie Mays in center field and Hank Aaron playing left field and Vladimir Guerrero Sr. playing right. Like I have Bob Feller and Bob Gibson pitching for me. I have legendary Hall of Fame players on this team that I've created. And it's just so fun being able to play all these different all these different legendary players mixed with new players and achieving these monthly goals and all this like cool stuff and collecting cards and opening packs. The thing that I'm sure you love about Magic, there's an aspect of this too, of that, like, what am I going to get in this pack that I open? And there's like a ton of different types of packs. So there's like different probabilities of gaining good cards and all that kind of stuff. I play it almost every day. And partially that's because I can play it in front of my son. You know, it's not a game. I just finished playing God of War. I would never play that in front of my children because it is extremely bloody. But this game, I can sit down, turn it on at 4:00 after work and play for half an hour. And my kids can kind of be around watching me or doing their own thing. And I don't feel worried that I'm, going to expose them to a terrible violence or, swear words or whatever. It's just a super, super fun game. One of the best, it's the best version of this game I've ever played. And it's just so, so good. I talked about it at one point on my podcast early on when I just got it. And I don't think I was as effusive as I am at this point. It's amazing. And at this point, you might be late to the game on it. Like, buying in now is like late in the cycle of it, right? Because baseball just ended. They're doing less updates, but I would recommend putting it on your calendar to buy in April next year if you want to experience it, because it's like there's new seasons every month or so, and you can do online play, which I don't do, but you can if you like that type of thing. Like, there's just so much you can do with this game. It's very well supported all year long. So yeah, MLB The Show 21, amazing experience.
Okay, cool. Is that something Alex would like?
Yes, I think Alex, the problem is Alex just has a Switch. So he doesn't have there was talk at one point of trying to bring it to the Switch, but it's such a beefy game. I don't even know if the Switch could handle it. Not even just visually, just the what's going on with it. I think they would really struggle to put it onto a system like the Switch. It's amazing though. I bet Alex would love it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I've been playing a similar game, sort of.
Sure.
In that there's a campaign in a sense, and you can also. It sounds like you can auto-resolve. You're auto-resolving some of the games that you're playing, like the baseball games. So you can. So this is a war game, and you can auto-resolve some of the battles, or you can fight them out yourself. So this is Total War, Warhammer 2. Aaron, have you played any of the Total War games?
No, I know years ago when Total War 2 Warhammer came out, they actually sent us a review copy and Quentin played it because at the time he had a good enough PC to handle it. And so he really liked it. He loved, I think he played the lizard folk.
Lizardmen?
Yeah, the lizardmen. And he really had a lot of fun with it. So is it a RTS, like a real-time strategy game, or is it turn-based?
No, it's a turn-based, and then it's the battles themselves are they're real-time tactical battles, but it's not a real-time strategy game in the sense that you're not going to mine resources and then building new units. You're doing that all in the turn-based campaign. So I played Total War Rome, which I think that was the first one. I played the very first Total War. That was 20-ish years ago, I think, something like that. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I probably played it for a ton, for probably 6 months. And I enjoyed it. It was fine. It was good. I had not then played any of the Total Wars. There's been a bunch of different flavors that have come out over the years, including the first Warhammer Total War came out, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. And then this is number 2 that came out. Now, what's really interesting is this is the Warhammer Fantasy Universe, which does not, quote unquote, exist anymore in terms of the tabletop miniatures game. Now, in the tabletop miniatures game, it's Age of Sigmar. There was basically this end times apocalypse event that occurred in the Warhammer Fantasy Universe, and then all of creation was redone. And there are definitely thematic ties between the old world and the Age of Sigmar world. But this is old school Warhammer Fantasy. So something that I've played for forever and I love, and it's fantastic. So as I said, this is a turn-based campaign game where you have these different territories with these capital cities and then these settlements. And it's kind of a civilization game in a sense where there are these tech trees that increases your income, but then as you build more military units, it increases your upkeep costs and things like that. But then the game can also be this tactical combat game where you have these different roaming lords and their armies, and you're attacking other armies, or you're laying siege to cities or to settlements, and you can auto resolve them. Like if you go into a match or into a battle and it's just a decisive, like I've got you outnumbered 5-1, you just auto resolve because you take almost no losses. It saves you like 20-30 minutes, and that's fine. Or you go into a match and it's going to be close. Generally speaking, you will perform better if you're somewhat good at the game. And there's a bit of a learning curve here. If you resolve the battle manually rather than doing an auto resolve. And what's really cool is there's very much like a rock, paper, scissors aspect to the different units. Like it's not just like throw units at each other. You are creating these rank and file battle lines with archers behind you and these war machines, big monsters. There's flying units. There's all sorts of stuff. But when I say like rock, paper, scissors, so I need, if I'm going to charge with my cavalry, I don't want to charge into spearmen. The spearmen will wreck my cavalry. So I want to make a smarter charge and charge something that's not going to wreck them so much. But then maybe I need to thin things out with my cavalry. The cool thing is it's all real time, right? So you set up your battle plan. You can assign certain certain characteristics or AI, I guess, where like you could tell your archers, you can say, okay, I want you in skirmish mode, meaning I want you to fire, and then when it looks like you're about to get overrun, you run away and then regroup and then fire again. Or you can put a unit in guard mode where they'll stay there, they won't move. Otherwise, they may run down a unit that's fleeing. Fleeing is important because this game isn't necessarily about killing, or the battles aren't about killing. They're about reducing the morale. Because as soon as you reduce the morale, that unit's running away, and then it becomes easier to kill them because they're not fighting. They're just running. They're running for their lives. I'm on my third campaign. I've played 2 Lizardmen campaigns. First one was a nightmare. I gave up after like 15, 20 rounds because I'm like, okay, serious mistakes were made. Second campaign with the Lizardmen was much better, although I also did poorly eventually. But I learned a lot. Now I'm playing as the High Elves, which is probably my least favorite faction, but that's kind of why I wanted to play them next, because I'm like, let's just get them out of my system. And I'm doing really well. And then I just slightly overcommitted and stretched myself too thin. And I think I'm about to
classic European mistake. I thought you were a smart man and you'd learn from history, Sean.
No. Well, it's interesting because there is this race mechanic. It kind of reminds me of like Civ 6, where one of the victory conditions is the scientific victory, where if you launch certain things into space, and I forget what all they are, you win. Regardless of anything else, you just win. And this has a similar thing where you're trying to perform these like 5 or 6 rituals. And so you can see this track where everyone is at performing these various rituals. And when you're performing a ritual, the chaos forces just come out crazy attacking you. And I just started performing a new ritual in the game I'm playing right now. And literally, as I started performing the ritual, these non-chaos factions started attacking some of my outlying settlements.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh boy, this was a mistake.
Yeah.
This was a mistake. So the game forces your hand sometimes because you're like, oh, this player is like really far ahead. I kind of need to attack them and take this particular settlement of theirs. But that might kind of stretch me a little bit too thin. So I'm having a ball with it. It's kind of like Civ 6 in that you're just like, oh, one more turn. Let me just do one more turn.
Yeah.
I'll just do one more
2
turn.
hours later, you're like, wow, it's real dark out.
Uh-huh. Yep. Or worse, wow, it's real light out.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. Yeah.
Well, that hasn't happened yet. That certainly happened plenty with Civ 6.
Yeah.
But,
No, it's really interesting that you wanted to talk about this because I literally got an email from that company saying that Total War Warhammer 3 is coming out in like February, I think. So
yeah, I think it was supposed to come out in August or September, and they just moved it back. Right. And that was actually why, because I was like, oh, I'm totally going to play. They're introducing a new faction, the Cathay, which were kind of drawn from like Asian, mostly Chinese influence, which was always sort of like referenced in the periphery of the background of Warhammer, but there was never like an official Cathay army or miniatures. So it's very cool that they're getting Warhammer Total War treatment. And that's actually what it was. I've talked about them a bunch now. The Tabletop Titan guys, who's a Warhammer, mostly 40K channel, they were talking about how bummed they were that Total War 3 was delayed. And I was like, oh, well, I'll pick up Total War 2. So that's how I came about that.
Yeah. And the beauty of it is it's probably way cheaper because the new one's coming.
No, it's not. You would think. And that's what I thought. And I'd gotten myself all excited for it because I'd watched some videos on YouTube before I checked the price. I'm like, it's probably like $19.99 now. And no.
So you watched videos on the internet, got real excited, and then just like immediately purchased you just couldn't resist holding back the urge.
Correct.
to erupt with excitement.
That's how I roll.
Yeah. I feel like that still works within the confines of this discussion.
Yeah. Well, what can you do? All right. Well, that is Total War Warhammer 2. That's our digital diversion, which is a Dukes of Dice exclusive.
Yeah. It's TM. Yeah, good try. I have digital evidence of the isn't that like, you know how people used to say you just write lyrics, write a song and mail it to yourself, and that's the copyright. Never open the envelope. And that'll hold up in court, right, Sean?
Well, you see, here's the thing. Nobody talks about video games online. So I'm just pretty sure.
Yeah, it's the first you're on the cutting edge of video games. I'm sure of it.
You know it. All right, well, that's going to do it for our recent plays. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with our featured review.
Well, Sean, the Game Toppers 3.0 Kickstarter is in the books, and thanks to a whole bunch of backers, Game Toppers had a heck of a Kickstarter campaign, more than $800,000 raised to get more Game Toppers, new features, all sorts of fun stuff headed folks' way.
Wait, did you say 800,000?
I did say that amount. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a ton of money.
Sean, did you make it in time? Are you part of that group?
It's over. It's over? Like over?
No, it's done. I'm sorry you missed your window. But the good news, Sean, is that if you keep an eye on the Game Toppers LLC website, the late pledge manager should be open in the near future. Take a look there, and you can still get in on all the fun, get the newest features, get yourself a Watson, or get yourself, I don't know, whatever you want. Awesome game mats, rails, something cool to really take your gaming experience to the next level without getting a fully dedicated gaming table, which is exactly what Game Toppers is all about. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com, because if it ain't a showstopper, it ain't a Game Topper.
All right, well, this is the time where Alex would have some clever intro that seems really apropos, and it's like, wow, he's so clever. Just comes off with that stuff off the top of his head, but really it's after several takes. But anyway, let's talk about Hallertau. All right, Aaron, well, you wanted to talk about Hallertau, one of the newer farming games from Uwe Rosenberg. This is published by Lookout Games with art by Lucas Simone, I think that's how you say his name, and Clemens Franz. And before we kind of jump into the rules, why did you want to talk about Hallertau?
Well, I had recently got a review copy of it from Asmodee Canada, and so I had been playing it a bunch because I'm going to talk about it on my show at some point. And I know that you like Uwe games, and the other things that I had played recently. Well, you sent me a picture of like all the games available, And I was like, man, I haven't played any of these games. So I went with the one that I thought you'd probably be into, Alex probably would not be into, and I brought that to the table. That's why.
All right. So Hallertau in Bavaria, Germany, is the largest continuous hop producing region in the world. It prides itself upon being the first in Middle Europe to cultivate hops. This game is set around 1850 when the Hallertau became what it is today. Oof.
Ooh. Thematically rich experience for sure.
As chief of a small Bavarian village in the Hallertau, your objective is to increase its wealth and prestige in the eyes of the world. To achieve this, you will need to supply the local craftsfolk with goods from agriculture and sheep breeding. Place your workers, play your cards right, and let your village shine. Oh man, this is great. This is fantastic. All right, so let's talk about Hallertau. It is a worker placement game where you are trying to slide your what is it? Your civic center, your
town hall,
shed.
Is it your? Yeah, it's like it. I was like, oh, is this not my cottage that I'm just sliding to the right over and over every round?
So, okay, let's talk about the 12 different individual player boards that each player has. It's actually like 4 or 5. So one of the big functions of the game is you have this rectangular board where on the far left hand you're putting this like shed, this civic center, something with a little window. The number that is revealed underneath that window is how many workers you start each round with. And as you are able to slide this civic center to the right, I don't know any of the words for this game. As you slide it to the right, you're going to have more and more workers available in each round. Cool. All right. How do you slide it to the right? Well, there are these 5 different craftspeople that want you to put one of 10
4
or so different goods.
Oh, yeah. 4 crops and 4 animal products, and then also clay, and then also jewelry too.
Yeah, tons of stuff. So there are these different crafts boards, little crafts tokens that are in a line, top down, so a little column of 5. And as you're able to spend certain resources in a certain combination, and it becomes progressively more expensive in subsequent rounds, you're able to slide these things over. And as you're able to slide enough of them over so that there's sort of a flush or enough empty spaces to slide your main civic center over, that's what you're doing. However, there are these pesky boulders in the way that you can spend, not so much spend tools, but use tools. You can gain tools throughout the game, and then you can use them, and they replenish to move those boulders so that you can move more than just one space for each of these crafts people, whatever, in a given turn. And the farther right you go, not only will you be revealing higher numbers for the number of workers you start, but you're going to be revealing some pretty high numbers for victory points, both in terms of underneath the window and then also for what's exposed the farther right you go. So some significant points there. All right. So that's kind of like what you're trying to do. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points for the points that are displayed on your player board, for moving everything over as much as you can. There's also a significant amount of card play in this game that reminds me a little bit of, say, the card play in viticulture. There's potentially points that you have for cards that you played. There is going to be points for every 5 resources and values of fields gives you a point. All of the sheep that you collect are going to give you points. And you add all that up, and whoever has the most is the winner. Now, the way that the turn structure looks is you start by clearing some percentage of existing workers from the board, and it depends on how many players you have. There are 4 quadrants, and so in a 4-player game, you clear the top row off of every single worker action space. So when you place a worker initially, if it's empty, if it's completely barren, it costs you 1 worker to take that action. The next player that wants to go there, it's going to cost them 2. The next player is going to cost them 3. And again, we're removing the top row from each quadrant in a 4-player game at the start of each round. In a 3-player game, we're removing 3 of the quadrants, and there's a randomizer to do that. Then, once you do that, there's some other little upkeep stuff that's not really worth getting into. The heart of this part of the game now is placing your workers. So I think you start the game with 6 workers, and then you can get as much as 12, 13 workers.
12, yeah.
And you place them out, and some of them will give you certain types of crops that you'll put on your individual player board. That's your crop storage. Some of them will give you bricks. Some of them will let you add fields to your board at different levels. So there's a level 2, 3, 4, and 5 field. Some will let you start at different levels. You'll place them on your board. Some actions will let you take crops that you have and then plant your fields so that they're going to produce stuff for you at the end of the round. Some things will give you sheep. Some things will let you slaughter sheep to get milk. Bunch of different stuff. It's an Uwe farming game, and it's all variations on kind of the stuff he's been doing for a decade and a half or whatever. All right, so you do all of that, but meanwhile, you also have all of these cards in your hand. There are these starter gate cards, and then there are these little like hat fedora cards, and then there's these market cards, and certain things have like prerequisites. Like, hey, if you happen to have 5 milk, we're going to give you 3 meats just because. And you play that card. You don't have to spend it necessarily for some of the starter cards, especially. Although there are some cards that say, hey, I need you to spend these things, but you're going to get points, and you're going to get to draw a new card, and you're going to get some other cool thing. There's other things that say, have these or pay these, and we're going to give you this as income in every subsequent round. So that's pretty cool. All right. So you do all of your worker placement, you play your cards, and the cool thing about the cards is you can pretty much play them whenever, which is pretty sweet. So you do that. Then if you have sheep, those sheep are going to produce milk. There's this weird thing where your sheep might die. I'm not going to get into that too much because it's a little fiddly. Not worth talking about here on the podcast, although we may talk about it in terms of gameplay. And then the most important part is forgot the harvest, right? So if you've planted crops, you're then going to get that number of crops equal to the level of where the field's at. And you're literally sliding the fields up or down to show their level. So if I have a level 3 field that is full of wheat, I'm just going to get 3 wheat for it. And then any field that I've harvested from is going to drop down a level. Any field that I have not harvested from is going to go up a level. You haven't used it, so it's getting a little bit more fertile. So that's pretty cool. Now I'm spending all of my resources to move these craftspeople over. And again, I mentioned it gets more expensive as the game goes on. So in the first round, I think it costs just 1 resource, right? 1 resource. And so like the first crafts person says you can spend brick or wheat, but you have to spend more brick than wheat. So in the first round, that's easy. You can just spend a brick and you move it over. You can't spend any wheat because you check for each move over, and 1 wheat is not less than 1 brick, if my math is correct. But in subsequent rounds, it might say, okay, you can spend 4 goods, or you can spend 3 goods as long as they are of 2 different varieties. And so in that case, I could spend 2 bricks and 1 wheat, and 2 is greater than 1, and that works. And there's different variations on that. And so you're moving those things over. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of it. And then you do that for 6 rounds. And again, whoever has the most points through moving your buildings over, moving your craftspeople over, playing cards that are worth points, leftover stuff. And then, I forgot to mention rings. There's these ways to get rings or jewelry, I guess. And they're kind of they just give you a bump over on something, or they might give you points at the end of the game. They're worth a point each, or then you may have some other way to spend them to do other stuff. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, totally.
So that's kind of a brief overview of how to play. Aaron, what was your experience as far as learning about this game? You said you got it as a review copy. Is that right?
Yeah, but I had requested it. So I I was not, I honestly recently have not felt that excited about Uwe games. I love Feast for Odin, which was one that we reviewed on this podcast, and I don't remember what I gave it. I think I might have given it a 5 at the time. I probably at this point would give it a 6 because it's probably one of my top 20 favorite games of all time kind of thing. But all the other Uwe games I've played, Caverna and Agricola, and some of those other ones that I forget the names of. Oh, Le Havre. I didn't like Le Havre. I'm sorry, Sean. Don't hate me. But I just
but number one.
I just didn't really dig a lot of those experiences. But I wanted to try this one out. And a guest on the show, John Gonzalez, he had come on my podcast and he had talked really highly of it. And I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm interested in trying it. I'd like to see what this one is all about. And so I didn't have high expectations for it going into it. So but I requested it because I wanted to try it out. And so, yeah, that was kind of my vibe going into this. What about you? Where were you at when coming to this?
So the name itself was uninteresting. I'm like, Hallertau, okay. And it looked like an Uwe farming game, which are hit or miss for me. When they hit though. Because Le Havre, although it's, I guess, really not a farming game, but it's a farming game. Favorite Uwe game and absolute 6. Caverna, I like a good amount, although I'm willing to get rid of it, although I haven't, which will make Tiger Mom happy because she was like, please don't get rid of Caverna. So for you, Tiger Mom, I've held on to it. But then have you played Ora et Labora?
No, I haven't tried that one.
Ooh, that game is so good. Oh, that's probably my second favorite Uwe game. Especially Uwe farming game. So yeah, but then Feast for Odin, it's okay. I'm like, I'll play it. I'll definitely play it. I got rid of my copy. It's good, but it's hard when it's competing with other Uwe games that I think are better. And so when I looked at Hallertau looks like one of the drier Uwe farming games. And I remember looking at it being like, oof, that's rough. Rory insisted that I buy it. So Rory from Board Game Library, Empire Board Game Library, insisted that I buy it. He's like, oh, it's so good. Keep in mind, Rory says everything's good. So I'm just like, Rory. He's like, trust me, you got to get it. I'll give you your standard. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll give you a really good discount. And he tells me like, Rory, that's my standard discount. That's what you always do. He's like, oh, well.
He's a good salesman though. He's a good salesman.
Yeah. I mean, he's something. Interestingly, almost ruined our podcast last night. So listeners of the show know that Rory does everything he can to meddle with his podcast and bring it crashing down. So I have played the game several times back in March when I first got it. Raquel and I played it a couple times. We enjoyed it and then haven't played it since. And I'm like, okay, I need to get another play of it in before we record. I scheduled it with Rory and with Trevor. And then Rory was on a bike ride up in the mountains and his bike broke down and he had to walk all the way down the mountain with his broken bike. This is what he says. So his fiancée, Marie, she texted me because she was in charge of letting everybody know, like letting his employees know, letting me know, because he wanted to conserve his battery. I think he was worried I was going to give him a bunch of crap. And made Marie do the dirty work. But anyway, so I don't think my expectations for it were super high. And I kind of just wanted him to shut up, so I bought the game. And I was like, oh, I'll just get rid of it at the next Gamers Garage sale.
Right.
And I'll just, whatever. So that was my expectation going in.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Cool.
All right. How did you learn the game? Did you learn it from the rulebook?
So I actually didn't want to read the rulebook because rulebooks are awful, and Uwe Rosenberg rulebooks are also fairly lame because they're usually pretty big. So I watched a YouTube video made by All You Can Board, and they taught me the game in a reasonable amount of time. And so I was like, okay, it was like a 20-minute video, and when you turn it on at 1.5 speed, it takes less time, and you skip ahead through certain parts. So you're like, yeah, okay, I got this. But yeah, so that's how I learned it. I didn't read the rules except for when I needed to reference things. I think there were times where I was like, where can I find this information? And it wasn't necessarily easy to find in the rulebook.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of my experience with it. What about you?
Yeah, I learned this game from the rulebook. So I think I've said before, Uwe farm games tend to be, the rulebooks tend to be really good rulebooks for referencing things and not as good for like learning the game and teaching the game. So, but I don't, I think the hardest part with a lot of Uwe games is the setup when there's like all these different decks. And not just like different decks, but like you can create each of these decks in one of 5 different ways. And it just seems like a lot of, well, I guess is more later in the discussion. But like variability for variability's sake.
Right. Yeah, totally. I get you.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, I don't think we had too much of a problem. Again, initially it was me and Raquel. I will say that so I played with Trevor last night, and I played with another worker at the store, Tress, and we had all played before, but again, we all had played back in March.
Right.
And we were able to remember pretty well. There were a couple little things that we had to look up real quick at the beginning of the game, but not a lot throughout the game.
No, I felt like it was actually pretty easy. I taught this to Brendan, my buddy, but then last night I played a 4-player game and taught it to the 2 players, and they are both very experienced board gamers, and so it was quite easy to teach. I just pointed at the board. I'm like, I'm not going to go over all these worker placement spots. They're very straightforward.
Yes.
If you don't understand one, just ask me. And they were like, yeah, we get it. So it's not a hard game to grasp. What if someone's like explaining it to you, and it wasn't hard to teach for sure.
So I'm going to make a quick aside here because I looked this up. So you, Quentin, and I reviewed A Feast for Odin back in episode 136. I'm not going to say the title of that episode just yet. We'll save that for later.
Sure.
I gave it a 4 out of 6. By the way, we rate everything here at the Duke's Dice on a 6-point scale. I said it's a brain burner. Aaron, you also gave it a 4.
Oh, wow. That's a mistake.
Strong.
That's a mistake.
Strong and powerful Viking rating is what I have here in the double take. I don't know what that means. Quentin gave it a 3.
Yeah, he doesn't.
For me, he said it's not horribly exciting.
No, and he doesn't like farming games, or I don't think the only Juve game he likes would be Bonanza.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, just a quick little aside. All right, let's talk about art and components. Any thoughts there, Aaron?
It's all fine. It's all nice. It like there's.
What if you were just like, no, I have no thoughts there. Let's move on.
No, I mean that's kind of how I feel. I think that like it all is serviceable. I like the little sheep meeples. And like all the little wood tokens are fun that they're shaped like the thing that's the iconography, but otherwise, like, well, I don't know. What do you want me to say? The box itself is boring looking.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think it's a lady just chilling on the front of the box pointing at like the village behind her or whatever. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the box looks like.
This is definitely like a very serviceable art and components.
Totally.
Right? Like it doesn't distract from it. It's like I said, it's maybe a little bit blander than other Uwe farming games. And I think they're like, so your workers are just cubes and you don't have any particular color of workers because everyone has just the same like navy blue cube workers. Which kind of reminds me of like Lords of Waterdeep, where your wizards, clerics, rogues, and warriors are just these cubes. And then if you want to like upgrade them with D&Dples, you can do that to add just like 3% more theme to the game. So I don't know. I think it was fine. I think it was serviceable. the only thing that's weird to me, and I don't know how to do this, but you literally have your farming board where it has like your goods storage, and it also has where you place your fields. You then have your like point board that you then place your town hall on top of, and then you have your individual round tracker board where certain cards go on, and which is also where you keep your sheep. And then you have your jewelry box board. Like, it's just a bit much.
Yeah.
And none of them are like the right size. So they don't even, when they go into the box, like they're just like awkwardly overhanging each other.
Uh-huh. It doesn't nest nicely at all. Like you could literally, I saw a video of, I think it was like Eric Martin just taking a Euro game and just dumping it all out and pouring it into the box without bagging stuff. And I was like, you could kind of do that with this game. I don't like, there's a bunch of different resources in this game. I literally store them all in one bag and then just dump them out. Because like there's no point in organizing. You're just gonna grab some of them. They can just live in a big pile. Like there's no organization necessary for this game. Everything could just be slopped on the table, and you could play it serviceably.
Yeah, it's weird. It's certainly weird. All right, let's put all that aside. What are people here for? They're here for gameplay.
Yes.
So was this an enjoyable game for you to play?
Yeah. Oh, it was way more interesting than I thought it would be. The card play was very interesting because the fact you can just play them whenever. Like there are times where like someone else will do something that will trigger your cards, like the good, like these cards have, some of these cards have multiple levels of goodness. Like if the first thing is met, you might get 1 meat chop, but if the second goal is met, you might get 5 meat chop, and if the third goal is met, you might get 9 meat chops, and so like all of a sudden you're like hoping that someone will do a thing that will help you trigger that higher level thing on the card. And so I just loved the card experience of hedging your bets that it might happen, or just giving up and being like, nah, I'll just play it now because I want this market card more than I want the like resources that this would give me, or whatever. That I found the card play quite interesting and somewhat random. You brought up the viticulture thing. I think that's an apt description, and I don't know, one of my buddy Brendan was saying, oh, that's what people have complained about this game with, is the randomness of the cards. And there are times where you pick up a card and you're like, this is useless, and it might guide you. If you pick it up early enough, it might guide your strategy, but also you can just be like, oh well, I'll just pick up another card in a different way. I think you get enough cards throughout the game that it doesn't hamper you unless you are so unlucky that you're getting or you're just bad at playing the game and you want to blame it on something. I mean, that might be you out there, listener.
So it's always weird to me that I love Euro games that just stress me out to no end. Like, what is that? That's weird. Like, I'm constantly stressed at work. Like, why do I want to play a game where I'm just like, what do I do here? I need 11 milk, but I only have 9. And if I do this, I won't be able to sow this field. And it's like so stressful. This game's super stressful, and I love it. I love stress. I don't know why. But the other thing I love about the best Uwe farm games is there's the sense of, okay, the big point of this game is for me to do X. And in this case, the big point of this game is for you to move your town hall as far to the right as possible. Because number 1, it gives you more points at the end of the game. Number 2, it gives you more workers throughout the game to be able to do more stuff. And it's not necessarily whoever moves there is the farthest is the winner, but it definitely helps because there's some like significant points once you get past a certain point.
If you can slide it all the way over, that's 70 points. I mean, that's at least 2/3 of your points if you're doing well.
Right. And so there's this point at like round 3, you're like, I am halfway through the game. I have moved my shed over twice. How in the world am I going to do any of this? And then if you're halfway competent, and usually put aside the first play, right? But then things kind of just work out. If you're smart and you're planning things out, and obviously your mileage may vary with that. But I really like that. I really like this, like, you're just like forlorn halfway through the game. Like, I'm miserable. Like, this is going to have real world implications where, like, my family's going to think I'm a loser. Like, and then you manage.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Or not. And then you're just, all your worst fears come true. I like that. And I'm always amazed by that. I'm always amazed by, like, what goes into that design, what goes into the thought process to, like, steamroll to that point. Because there's definitely this point where it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna do any of this. Like, this is, I should just quit. I should just flip the table and be done.
Wow, you go through like midlife crises every Euro game that you play, where halfway through you're like, what am I doing with my life? That's messed up, man. That's kind of weird. Maybe you should take a look at what you're doing with your life.
Well, and it's worse when I'm playing with Raquel. Raquel, who is Raquel, I never win, is like, that's what she always says. Oh, I never win. And then I pull up my board game stats app. I'm like, look, this is how often you win, especially in like midweight Euros. She's got like a 70, like when it's a 2-player game, she's got a 70% win rate against me in midweight Euros, like easily. And she's a bit of an AP player, and she will be the first to admit that. And I'm just like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm just gonna do this, and this. And I'm super fast. Look how fast I am. Look how my brain works. And then she's like, taking her time. And she's like, oh, I scored 98 points. How much did you score? 62. Oh, okay.
Ooh, 62, not great, my dude. I will say.
Well, hold on. I'll look.
But while you do that, I will say, like, outside of the card play, there's a lot that I really like in this game. I like that 2-field fallow and crop system, where, like, if you leave it, it'll get better, but you don't want to leave too many fields open because you need those resources. You want to, in the early rounds, because it's so cheap to slide the thing over, like those craft buildings over, you want every last resource to slide those over. But then, you also need tools to do that. So you're also spending your cubes to collect tools to be able to do that. So then you're limiting the actions that you can do. And so, like Sean was saying, it compounds that stress and that, like, I don't have enough. But then as the game ramps up and you do slide it over, you're getting more and more workers. And that's cool, except for the fact that slowly you've, as a group, filled the board with workers, and so everything is more expensive. So you think, now that I have 12 workers, that's twice as many as I had at the start of the game, so I must be able to do so much more, except that the board is so much more full, and like sowing your fields is going to be, everybody's trying to get in on sowing your fields, that everything is so expensive that those 3 cubes are being used to do one action. And so, like, that balance mixed with your, like, fight for when you want to sow fields, when you want to leave them blank, when you want to just cash in as many of those resources to slide it over, like, all of that is just really, really interesting in this game. Far more interesting than I thought when I walked into experiencing this game.
All right, my first play, Raquel got 81.
Oh, that's a good first place score.
That's a really good first place score. Oh, I kind of don't want to say now. Give me a guess. What am I going to say? And you're going to be wrong. You're going to be so wrong.
Oh, well, see, now you set me up. I'm going to say 42.
33.
Not great. That's about what one of our buddies that played with us for the first time last night scored, in the, like, 30s. And I was like, dude, that's not great.
Yeah.
So,
I remember I made the mistake. So one of the things you're able to do is you're able to turn in a worker for a tool. And again, you're using those tools to advance the rocks, the boulders that are speed bumps, because normally you can only move each of the craftspeople over one space per round.
Yeah.
And then the boulders will reset. But you can use the tools to move the boulders forward. So I'm just like, I get this game. This game is all about moving the boulders. Like, I'll be able to get all these other resources, no problem. And so I started off the game. I'm just like, I'm going to turn in, of my 6 initial workers, I'm going to turn 4 of them into for tools.
Oh,
I'll never have to worry about tools again. Wow, you're dumb. You're super dumb. My second play, Raquel got 97. I got 77.
Okay.
So, okay.
You're still doing bad. Like Brendan, after the first game, Brendan never scored that low again in our 2-player game. So you're bad. Sean.
Okay.
But
well, last night, my only 3-player game, I scored 107.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I scored in our 4-player game last night. I came in second with 108. I lost by 1 point.
Oh, get out! 108. So, one over mine. Come on.
My highest score in our 2-player games, chill your butt. My highest score was 121. And that was me getting it. That was a superb game, getting my house all the way to the right and triggering a lot of goal cards. Actually, only like a lot of the market cards that get you points, but also build your engine. Those are great. Oh, I love those so much.
Did you say you got 121?
Yeah, 121.
Because I'm sorry, there was a mistake. There's a smudge on my phone. I actually had 122.
Oh yeah, so. I'm sure that you should clean your phone more frequently.
So what was interesting that 107 game I played, so Trevor got his thing all the way to the right. I was actually too short of all the way to the right, but I had like an insane amount of scoring cards.
Right.
I had I think it was 8 different income cards. And I would say like on average, maybe you've got like 3, 4 if you're doing particularly well.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to stop bragging about how great I am at this game, obviously. but yeah, like those are your mini engine. Like you want to collect those market cards and score them because every round you're going to get something out of it. And they are fairly varied. And not only are you going to get that, but you also score points off of them at the end of the game. I found that the points cards, the ones that were straight up just like trade 10 sheep in for 20 points or 15 points or whatever, I was like, that is way more daunting than spending a little bit to get a repeated benefit for the rest of the game.
Sure. And I think that's where kind of the card play comes in. Because you definitely can get really lucky, like you mentioned with the cards, where, I mean, I've been able to like chain cards together where I wasn't setting it up. It was just like, you play this card and you're getting this benefit and you get to draw a new card. Oh, hey, this new card I just drew, I can play it immediately and get some other benefit. Oh, wait a second. That new benefit lets me play this other card I had in my hand that I wasn't planning on playing right now. And that was definitely the case in my game last night. Like I was hot with that top of deck lottery of cards.
And that's thrilling. I mean, that is a thrilling experience, right?
Yes.
Where you're comboing. I mean, that's what I love about deck builders. That's what I love about card-based games where I'm like, oh, I do this and that leads to this. And then that makes me feel like a god among men. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. And that kind of goes back to that viticulture thing. That's a complaint for a lot of people about viticulture. I think if you are more of kind of a purist Euro player that dislikes luck in Euro games, you may want to avoid this game.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see being disappointed by the card draws. But then you're just a big sad person who doesn't enjoy like reacting and being tactical. I think this game requires long-term strategy, but the flexibility of the tactical reaction to the cards you are dealt. And I like that I can choose to pursue the cards that I get dealt at the start of the game, and that can kind of give me some guidance as to what I want to do. But also, I know that I got to move my house over, right? Like, I know I got to do that, but also I can try and work towards these cool cards, and maybe that'll combo together. Sometimes they're totally weird and they're not going to mesh together, and sometimes they do start meshing together because of the cards you collect throughout the game. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And I just think you just need to know who you are as a player.
Yeah.
And, it's different. It's different than some other Uwe games where there's randomization, but it's not necessarily luck. Right.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So for me, I enjoyed it. I as someone that plays a lot of luck-based games, that plays, Magic and card games, and it doesn't bother me, but I could certainly see how it would bother some people.
Totally.
So here's what I'm thinking, and we're not quite there at final thoughts, but I'm now comparing it to other Uwe farming games, and the question is, okay, which is better, Hallertau or X? So I'm gonna shout some out.
Okay.
Le Havre, which is my favorite. You're gonna say Hallertau's better.
Yes, I did enjoy. I've only played Le Havre once, and it was fine. It wasn't like a bad game. It was fine. It just didn't draw me in like I had. I think people had hyped it up. People like you. There's lots of folks online that are like, Le Havre is a masterpiece. It's so wonderful. And I played it. And I was like, yeah, sure. That was cool. That was fine. I mean, I got some buildings and I traded this resource for that resource, and it was a thing. It felt like how I reacted to Anno 1800. Like it was fine. I'm not trying to compare those. Don't be offended by that.
Le Havre is very much like, okay, I have this much food I have to feed all my people. It's like a different feeding mechanic than Agricola. And it's super stressful, kind of like Hallertau. Okay, so I think Le Havre is better. What about Agricola? Agricola or Hallertau?
No, Hallertau, hands down for me.
I would agree Hallertau, but I'm kind of low on Agricola.
Yeah, I am very low on Agricola. I find that game to be annoying. I
like playing the Agricola app. I prefer, I'll play the app over the actual board game. Okay. Hallertau or Caverna?
Hallertau for me. Caverna is too forgiving. It's too milquetoast. Like there's no meat to that game. There's so many options that I never feel stressed, and so I don't care.
I'm going to give it to Hallertau as well. Yeah, I think so. If it's Hallertau versus Or at Labora, which you haven't played, for me it's hands down Or at Labora. That game's fantastic. What about Hallertau versus Fields of Arle?
I like Hallertau better. I also felt like Fields of Arle was fine. Like there was nothing that really grabbed me in that one either. Oof. So
for me, it's clear Fields of Arle. I love Fields of Arle so much.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I'm glad you're here.
What am I missing? What am I missing? What are we missing?
Well, we didn't say Feast for Odin.
Oh.
You don't like you say that, and I like all the things I said about Caverna, about it being too easy and blah, blah, blah. That could be heaped upon Feast for Odin, but I love the spatial puzzle of it, and the like polyomino thing, and just trying to find the right strategy to fill my board. So I still love a Feast for Odin more than this one.
Okay. Yeah. And I'd give it to Hallertau. Is that it? What am I missing? We're missing something?
The Glass Road I've never played.
Oh, Glass Road. Oh, Glass Road. Glass Road is so much lighter. Glass Road is like a lighter version of Ora et Labora. I'm going to give it to Glass Road.
I think that's a mistake, but that's fine.
I like Glass Road is a really good, like, lighter Uwe farming game. And the card play, like, it's like card action selection sort of, and like following, and I mean, I love following games. Following games are my jam. So with that being said, like, it's interesting to say that I would then put this kind of in the middle of the pack, but I think the problem is that Or at Labora, Fields of Arle, and Le Havre are all like super high sixes. Like, what do you do with that? Like, that's just not fair.
I think, didn't you recently talk about the concept of a game within a vacuum? Where like a game in and of itself can be really good, but when you compare it with certain other things, that impacts your perspective on it, which, I mean, that's fine. Right. We don't live in a vacuum. You can't review a game in a vacuum. You have your own personal biases that impact how you view stuff. So it's fine to have games that he has done that are masterpieces to you that affect the way you view a game. That's not problematic, Sean.
No. Well, I guess I'll say also that we've kind of just bypassed theme.
Yeah, theme. There's a lot of people in the guild, we'll get to it later, but they were like trying to incorporate names that were related to hops because Hallertau is based on that. I had a buddy, Brendan and I play this at work. Like we set it up in the corner of my library and he'll come down at lunch and we'll play like 2 rounds. By the way, this is a fantastic lunchtime game because the rounds play so quickly. We could sit down, play 2 full rounds, and then just be like, cool, we'll finish, we'll keep going later. So that was fantastic. But one of the guys who had worked at a brewery this summer, he was like, oh, Hallertau, I know that's related to beer because, the brewery I worked at this summer had beer that was based on Hallertau hops. And I was like, oh, interesting. That was the most thematic experience I had playing this game, right? I mean, so it's not there really.
Well, let me take a step back. What you said, that it's a great lunchtime game, not necessarily a lunchtime in one setting, but the turns are like super snappy, right? Like even like the card play, you can just be like, I'm going to place my workers. You can go and go. I may have a couple things I chain together. And the only reason you might care is if you care what order you're drawing cards from, like the merchant deck. Right. Who cares? Like it's random. Who cares?
But, and it literally is, you can play those cards at any time. So you literally can just be like, well, that's just how it worked. There is no turn structure. You can play at any point.
Well, and I guess the only exception would be like, okay, technically you're in, what is it? The phase 4, whatever, where you're playing out workers. But if I'm done, and you've still got a couple workers, someone else a couple workers, I'll just be like, hey, I'm just going to resolve all my stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of simultaneous doing of bookkeeping in this game, which I think is fantastic. I love when that happens because everybody just moves at their own pace with regards to that. So,
and what I will say though is that does lend itself then to not being a super interactive game, except for the fact that where you place out your workers as like any other worker placement game is potentially denying spots or making them more expensive for other players. Mm-hmm. But it is, I mean, multiplayer solitaire, blah, blah, blah. I'm fine with that. It's not
as someone that's played it at different player counts, I feel like you could play this solo and it wouldn't feel that different from playing it 2-player or like 4-player. It's just more expensive for stuff. Like the board just fills up way more. And so you're competing over certain spots. And so that was the only real feel that I got from playing it 4-player versus 2-player.
There are a great many midweight Euro games that I have 0 interest in playing at 4 players. Mm-hmm. And I haven't played this at 4 players, but I get the suspicion that I would be just fine playing this at 4 players.
Oh yeah. I taught this game and we played it in 2 hours. 4-player.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's really, really good for a 4-player medium weight Euro. That's like this involved.
So let's go over to the guild. Sylvain Lacroix, by the way, I have some serious issues with Sylvain right now. Serious issues. He has been talking up Games Workshop's Warcry, which is sort of the fantasy version of Kill Team. And recently it was Games Workshop Day, which is just like, hey, we'll give you a moderate discount to come buy stuff at your friendly local game store. So I went over to our local Etten Games and they were actually offering a higher discount on Warcry products. And I picked up the Warcry Catacombs starter set, thanks to Sylvain's nefarious influence. And I messaged him and like, you're on my poop list right now because I did not need to make this purchase. Anyway, Sylvain says, I tend to enjoy Uwe Rosenberg farming games, but I have to admit that it's been a while since I played any of those. Hallertau actually reignited my love for Rosenberg games. As similar as it seems, I found Hallertau to be quite different. The cards are really the central focus of the game, and they can make or break the game. Actions are quite limited, but I found that it was challenging and fun enough to go back and play again. I would give it a very high 4.
All right, I get to read one. Paul Naxer says, I've given Hallertau a spin just once. It was a bit different from other Uwe games, drawing at random from 4 decks. One of my opponents had a terrible time trying to get cards to work for him, but they cascaded into big points for me. I gave up on moving the community center after the first third of the game since it seemed like more work than it was worth. I did end up winning somehow. All in all, it was okay. Would rather play Glass Road or Fields of Arl for my Uwe fix still, because Paul is wrong.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think that's probably why this is going to stay in my collection, because even though there's a lot of similar DNA to other Uwe farming games, it is still quite different in a lot of other ways. That card play is something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. I think it provides a different enough feel to all those other things, which is weird because it is really just a worker placement game with some cards that sounds somewhat like viticulture. Now, I will say that I am a fan of viticulture, and so I'm not surprised that I like this one also, because I'm okay with that frustration of drawing cards that don't work for me, because I had that happen. Right? Like I had games where cards worked for me. I had games where they didn't, but I was able to work around those issues and I was okay with it. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it's final thoughts time. We rate everything here, like I said before, at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale. 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. 6 is an all-time favorite that is a contender for the top 10. Aaron, you're the guest. Why don't you go first?
All right. Well, I feel since you broke into the conversation midway through to give my score of the last time I was on the show, and I made a horrible mistake of giving Feast for Odin only a 4, which is, I don't see how you must have convinced me that it was other, something not valuable. I was struggling with this. I was like, it's between a 4 and a 5 for me. It belongs in my collection. I'm not getting rid of it. It's going to stay here. But is it that 5 that's like, I will rarely say no to it? And I mean, I've played it a lot over the last, it was on the table at work 4 straight times. People were coming in and were like, are you still playing the same game? And we're like, yeah, but this is the 3rd or 4th game that we've played. And so at this point, I've played it 5 times in the last month. In quick succession. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready to not play it right now. Mm-hmm. But 3 months from now, I would, if someone was like, hey, do you want to play Hallertau? I would be like, yeah, I think I do. And so I don't want to make the same mistake I did last time and go with the weaker score. I'm going to preemptively go for the higher score. I'm going to give it a 5. It's not going to be in my top 20 games of all time, but it's easily in my top 100. I've had fun with it. I love the card play. To be honest, I feel like for me, this replaces viticulture in my mind. Okay. I was already kind of slipping on that game anyways, but this one has the timing, the timing thing in viticulture that I like. There's an aspect of that in this with the fields shifting up and down. Yeah. And that's fair. We never brought it up, but the whole your sheep get too old and sometimes die, but so then you have to think about I'm going to try and protect them to make them older, or I'm just going to butcher them and take them for their resources. That little timing aspect was interesting too. So I really had a lot of fun with this, and I think maybe it's because I had low expectations coming into it that has just so far exceeded my expectations, and I've played a lot of fine Euros recently, and so this just was a breath of fresh air, even though it's a lot of basic, straightforward, older ideas kind of mashed together with a boring presentation and no theme. So yeah, a 5 in a weird way. I wouldn't say it's a low 5, but it's kind of a low 5.
Okay. Well, for me, I already said, well, it's not one of those big three. Le Havre, Fields of Arla, and Ort Labora. So it can't be a 6. It just can't, right? But I also think that if we look at a 5, which by the way is a great game, we'll rarely turn on a play of it. I almost feel like because those 3 6s are my go-to Rosenberg games, go-to farming Rosenberg games, it almost kicks this out of a 5 as well, right? Because it's like, well, if someone says, hey, do you want to play Hallertau? I'd be like, oh, tell you what, let's play Ort Labora instead. I'll teach you Ort Labora. So I feel like it kicks it out of a 5. So it's going to be a 4, a good game, worth playing just all the time, belongs to the Duchy. It's staying in my collection, but it's a very high 4. Now, a year from now, the double take, I don't know.
I will say, let me barge in and just say that you could probably pick up and play it fairly easily a year from now, right? Like some Euro games, you're like, okay, what do we do? How do we set this up? Like blah, blah, blah. I feel like this game, everything is straightforward enough that you, a year from now, could jump into it and not be confused about what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think case in point, it was about 7 months since I played it last and virtually ready to go out of the box. Setup is a little bit difficult, but that's fine. So, well, all right, Aaron, we did it. That's going to do it for the Duke's review of Hallertau. That is a low 5 from Aaron and then a high 4 from Sean.
I want to make a joke about low 5 being like, in the crotch region, like, haha, but don't put that in. That's not, there was no good joke there.
Yeah.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, it's Duke's Double Take time because I forget how Alex introduces the segment, but here we are. Last year, give or take, it was episode 237. We had a little episode titled Rome Wasn't Built in a D-Day. This is totally not how Alex does the segment at all. This is so off. We played Roman Roll, which was kind of a more involved roll and write game where you're collectively building up the city of Rome. And then you've got your own little player board and different provinces and other stuff and whatnot. At the time, I gave this game a 3. I said this could have been a 5, but there were just a lot of missteps that bumped it down to a 4, then bumped it down to a 3. I'm still willing to play this game, is what I said then. I thought there were lots of things to explore, different buildings, different god cards, but I said I only want to play this at 2 players, and I don't see myself keeping this. And I was sad that it was not as much as I had hoped it would be. Alex, bringing the heat, gave this a 1, and he said this is a clear 1. Folks, we have so few 1s that we've handed out over 7 years. He said that with component issues, with the playability issues, problems with writing on the central board, it makes it fall below just not wanting to play it. It's to the point where he thought it was in the poorly designed territory. He had zero fun playing it, and he was aggravated by the game in so very many ways. Woo! All right. Well, Aaron, do you have any experience playing Roman Roll?
No, mostly because I listened to this podcast and when the two of you were like, I was not interested in worrying about experiencing this game whatsoever.
So here's the bright side. The bright side is that a game like Hadrian's Wall exists.
Right.
Which is everything I wanted Roman Roll to be. Did we review Hadrian's Wall?
Yeah, you totally did. You talked about it. I think even Alex liked it. I don't know.
Now I just can't remember. I can't remember if I gave it a 5 or a 6. I will say that at the time when we reviewed it, assuming that's what happened, and you say it is, and I believe you, I just don't remember. I was disappointed because I could not get a copy of it because it was out of print. It recently just came back into print with a new print run, and I totally picked up a copy of Hadrian's Wall, which is not the double take game, but it's a better game. Why are we talking about Roman Roll?
Yeah. Do you like, random question, do you like meteor involved roll and write style games? Because for me, I like lighter ones. I like ones that are not like a big sheet, a big flow chart or whatever.
Yeah.
I like ones. I just recently played Let's Make a Bus Route, the dice game. I loved the original, and I tried the new one, like the dice version that's only up to 2 players, and it's light and fun and quick playing. It was like such a great lunchtime game and lunchtime experience. So I like those, but I also like games like, Gauntron Clever that I'm comboing stuff together, but I never feel like that's an overly onerous type of game. So what do you like when you're talking with the roll and write style games?
So I think for the most part, the vast majority of them are the faster, lighter games. Roman Roll appeared to be one of the, at least at the time it was on Kickstarter, one of the few heavier, more involved games. And so I had high hopes for it, and it just completely disappointed. Whereas Hadrian's Wall, I think, is an excellent, and even then, I'm hesitant to call it a roll and write. It's more like resource management, worker, not so much placement, but worker like manipulation and write, which is not nearly as easy to roll off the tongue. But it still kind of feels like a roll and write, even though, there's technically flipping of cards, which can be a replacement effect for rolling dice, but still, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think just because of the majority of what's been out there, being more lighter games, absolutely. But I think it's probably harder to put together a more involved roll and write.
Okay. I get you. I was curious because I think for me, I'd rather just dig into an actual full length game over, trying to roll and write my way to a crunchy euro.
Sure. So, well, I asked Alex, oh, by the way, we haven't mentioned yet the whole reason that you're here, aside from you just being a cool dude, is because Alex had a baby. So a week ago, Alex and Abby had the baby, had Ruby, little Ruby. So congrats to them. That was sort of the reference at the way beginning of the episode when we talked about it's brought to you by poopy diapers and sleepless nights, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned the last episode, Alex is going to be on Duke-ternity leave. And so yeah. So congrats to them. But despite having just a freshly newborn child, I said, "Hey, Alex, can you let me know what your double take thoughts are about Roman Roll?" And he said, "I haven't played it, and I'm shocked that there's an expansion for it. Same score."
Coming in hot with the take.
And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop my score. I'm going to drop it to a 2. I have zero desire to play this. I will almost certainly refuse to play this. A 2 is game has some merit, but has significant issues. And we've always kind of had a little underlying, like, if you refuse to play a game again, then it's probably at best a 2. So yeah, I'm dropping it to a 2.
Unleash
bummer.
the 2. Unleash the 2, Sean.
It is unleashed. So, all right. Well, and no guilt thoughts, because
no one cared, because you
Nobody
pooped
cared.
all over that game so hard that people like me who enjoy your podcast were like, well, I'm not going to touch that game. You have so much power, Sean.
What was the other one? Oh yeah. Victorian Masterminds.
Yeah, that one, I didn't hear much about that one anyway, so it's not like you skewed everybody too much.
If you're go listen to the episode where we review Victorian Masterminds and then the double take where we talk about it again. I was just merciless to that game. It was oof. oof. All right, so that is the Duke's double take of Rome wasn't built in a D-Day. Or wait, no, Roman Roll is the name of the game. That was the Oh boy, Alex.
I'm Aaron. I'm not Alex.
No,
Aaron.
I know. I'm saying like Alex, like I need you to
Sorry. I should have taken on more of the co-host duties to like segue things for you. I'll be honest. I do them fine on my show. I'm just not expecting to have to do it on your show too.
I'm just not used to it. So anyway, Roman Roll stays at a 1 for Alex and drops from a 3 to a 2 for Sean. Third person Sean.
Way to drop that deuce, buddy. Way to drop that deuce.
All right, Aaron. Well, we are in the home stretch of the show here. Before we wrap it up, though, we need to talk about the best of the rest, the honorable mention names for naming this particular episode. Do you want to lead us off there with BJ?
Yeah, sure. BJ from Board Game Gumbo said Roman Holiday, which is a reference to a film that, unsurprisingly, I have not seen. Because I have seen very few, I guess. It's the entire premise of my podcast.
Well, and that's what he said about Alex. He's like, I'm sure Alex has not seen this. I think Alex would be the worst guest for classic Callback.
Yeah, I think there was a point where he was like, hey, have you seen like blank? And I was like, yeah, dude, I have seen that one. Like he was like trying to come up with ways to like get into my podcast, the other show. And I was like, yeah, no, we've seen it. We've seen it. Sorry. You got another? And he never gave me another one.
Just to say Roman Holiday, that's like Roman Holiday. You've got the Roman Roll. You've got the Hallertau. Good job, BJ. Steve O'Rourke, the so-called name father, although I think Sean Connery may be coming for him. He suggested hops.
Boo to you. Boo to you, sir.
He suggested hops on pops, which is, there's a Dr. Seuss book, Hop on Pop, right? And we got the hops from Hallertau and not so much the Roman Roll, but new Paparino, a little Poppy Pop, which is Alex. Dad, short for dad.
There you go.
Other term for dad.
All right, well, Joshian Gurr says, and Aaron, which obviously is a very self-referential thing. So great job, Joshian Gurr.
And then Nick Hayes suggested Uwe Rollenberg, because talking about a Roland right in addition to an Uwe game. Nick.
And Paul Naxer says Lupuli Germania, which he said Lupuli is, I don't even know, is that, how do I say that word? Lupuli?
Lupuli.
Lupuli.
Latin for hops, I believe.
Yes, Latin for hops, and then Germania was what they called Germany, which is like, you know, where Uwe is from and where this game is set, probably.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is it for the rest of the honorable mentions. Normally we have 5 honorable mentions, but we added a 6th/7th, depending on how you want to count it, if you include the actual episode title. And this was from Blaine Miley, and it's Strange Brew, which is a reference to John Candy and
no, not John Candy, Rick Moranis and that other guy.
The other guy.
From SCTV, which was a well-loved, Saturday Night Live skit comedy style show.
Oh my goodness. Dave
Thomas. Dave Thomas. Yes, thank you. We got there.
Yeah.
But the problem, Blaine, is that last time I was on this podcast, Patrick Hillier named it Strange Brew-Vey. So he actually changed it a little bit, and so Strange Brew has been used. So I love the Canadian touch, and
yes.
It makes sense because we're talking about a game about brewing beer, sort of about hops and I guess harvesting the beer. But sorry, it was done in the past.
But wasn't John Candy in Strange Brew? He wasn't one of the 2 leads.
Well, maybe he was friends with all those guys. He was on.
Yeah,
SCTV.
he was part of. Okay, maybe not. All right, maybe not. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Okay, all right. Well, Aaron. By the way, thanks, Guild. Fantastic job as always. And Aaron, thank you so much for helping out the Dukes of Dice podcast and being someone that can fill the void of Alex, whatever that means.
The phrasing on that is interesting, but sure.
Yeah. So, Aaron, tell people how they could find out about Boards Alive and Classic Callback podcast.
So if you want to listen to any of them, we're on podcast networks, like that, like Catchers or whatever. We're all over the place. So you can just search up Boards Alive or search up Cult Classic Callback. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Boards Alive and at Cult Classic Pod. You can visit the website, boardsalivepodcast.com. Also, if you don't mind, Sean, I'm going to plug the disgusting mustache that's on my face and say that for the month of November, I am growing a terrible, ugly mustache in support of raising money for prostate cancer research from a good charity called Zero. So if you want to head to one of those Twitter things or on my Board Game Geek Guild number 2002, which is 6 better than the one that's on this show, and you can find the link to my page for that. I'm at 80% of my goal already within the first week, so I'm hoping that I can smash through that and just raise lots of money to help people not have cancer in their nether regions.
And again, if you want to help support another good cause, Extra Life will be over, but you could certainly go support that. I'll put a link, and then Aaron, give me a link for yours as well. I'll put those both in the show notes. So far, thanks to you for donating. Thanks to the Name Father for donating. Very generous donation. And then I will say this, before we wrap this up, I was super excited because there was another very generous donation from Sean Connery. Not me. And I was like, ooh, a new mystery abounds. I'm like, this is so exciting. Like, did this new Sean Connery leave clues? Did this new Sean Connery, like, oh my God, is this going to be like this whole thing? Like it's Tyler Durden and we're forming fight clubs across the country. And I'm like, it's happening. My cult is happening finally. And I go to look at the donation page and there's this ugly mug of Alex Goldsmith. And I'm like, oh, what a letdown. Like, thanks for the generous donation, Alex. But I'm like, add some mystery here.
You wanted to follow a trail of breadcrumbs to find that it was just Alex in the end. I think that's a good joke. I think him just being like, using a faux name to give you money is pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, bummer. Bummer. All right. Well, again, Aaron, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Alex appreciates it. Abby appreciates it. And little Ruby, even though she has no idea what a podcast is or how to play any board games, she's just like, thanks, Aaron. I don't think she sounds like that or that she can talk yet. But who knows? All right. Well, that's going to do it then for episode 262. Thanks again to Kyle Kelly for II.Review. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Aaron.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice podcast. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy and also in West Kelowna, where I live. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find them on Twitter, because it's not me. Find them on Twitter at Dukes of Dice and me on Twitter at Boards Alive. Join the conversation on their Board Game Geek Guild number 2008, and mine is 2002 if you want to join in there too. Find them on Facebook and subscribe to their YouTube channel. Thanks to the Dukes of Dice sponsor Game Toppers LLC. Find their sweet tabletops at GameToppersLLC.com. Sean will see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.